From LPM,
Louisville Public Media.
Welcome to the very first episode of Where Y'all Really From, a podcast about Asian Americans in Kentucky. We're going to tell just some of the stories of the over 75,000 Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders living, learning, and loving in Kentucky. I'm your co-host, Dan Wu, a Lexington, Kentucky small business owner, local activist and organizer, and first-generation Chinese immigrant. For today's inaugural episode, I'm joined by my co-host, Charlene Buckles, a longtime immigration activist, former teacher turned fundraiser, and a proud Filipina Kentuckian. Welcome, Charlene.
Thanks, Dan. We're also joined by our podcast co-creators and co-conspirators, Nima Kulkarni and Mae Suramek. Nima is an immigration attorney and a Kentucky state representative for the 40th District, the first Indian American and Asian American to serve in the Kentucky House. Mae is a reformed nonprofit administrator turned entrepreneur. She owns Noodle Nirvana, Happy Jack's World Sandwich Bar, and Hole and Corner Donuts in Berea.
I will say I'm going to give all creation credit to Nima and Mae because they just randomly called me up one day and said, hey, let's do something. And I think for us, we're recording this first episode mid-May of 2021. And I think for a lot of Asian Americans, the horrific murders out of Atlanta were a big wake-up call for a lot of us. And a lot of us just had this huge sort of gut feeling about let's do something. And many of us didn't really know what that something was. So you all kind of came up with this something. Nima and Mae, tell me about how this idea came about and why I guess we're asking ourselves, why are we doing this show?
Nima, you're the one that picked up the phone, made that first move.
I did. And, it kind of came about because we were on Renee's show and together, and we were talking about the vigil and the rise in anti-Asian hate and violence and harassment. And I just picked up the phone and I called you, and it's exactly what I said. Let's do something. I didn't know if it was going to be a podcast. I didn't know what the format would be. But I figured that you needed to be involved. And then you immediately picked up the phone and then called Dan. So there we had it.
Yeah. And
it was that easy.
Yeah, the Renee in question is Renee Shaw, the great and good Renee Shaw from KET and her show Connections that we were all three on different occasions. So Mae, when you started thinking about the whole idea of let's do something, what did you come to? What were your initial feelings?
Well, like Nima said, after Renee's show, I was first of all I was fangirling over Nima because I had not met her in real life before, and first Asian American in the Kentucky State House of Representatives. I was fangirling, but we talked about some really important emotional things that day, and then we just left, and then we just went on our separate ways, and it felt like a really great missed opportunity to follow up on that. So I was really grateful, and then I just went about my busy life, running restaurants. So when Nima called with that, I was like, yes, this is I was so grateful. And I think, Nima, you mentioned the word maybe podcast, maybe blog, maybe something, and as soon as you said podcast, my ears just perked up, and I said, give me 1 second. I'm going to try to get my friend Dan on the phone right now. And I did this 3-way call immediately. And it just exploded from there, really. And I think in our initial conversation, we knew that we needed a safe space for our community from the different regions, the different corners of Kentucky, rural, southeastern to the city in Louisville to central Lexington, but a space for all the diverse AAPI community members to gather and have a voice.
And I'm so grateful to be a part of this project and to also create that space for other AAPI Kentuckians. When Dan tagged me in on this project, I was about 3 months postpartum, and I really didn't know what to do. Usually I'm trying to activate and organize when things like this happen. And I really didn't know if I was ready to engage in that level, but I wanted to create something that was meaningful and to give a voice to those who often whose stories are untold or overlooked in Kentucky. And I think this podcast is just a great space to do that.
Yeah, and really storytelling and the ability to have a voice is so crucial for our community, because I think for a very long, I mean, we've been in this country to varying degrees for a couple hundred years now, and a lot of our stories have just not really been told, and especially in a place like Kentucky, people don't think about Asians in Kentucky, right? And I think all of us in our own way are trying to change that. Now, Mae, you and I have known each other for a few years. When I first opened Atomic Ramen, one of the earliest calls I made was to Mae Suramek, because I wanted to know, like, how do you run a business in sort of like an ethical way that still really ties back to the community? And I really looked to you and Noodle Nirvana kind of as a model of all that. But now you've got this little mini empire in Berea, a little college town south of Lexington. You've got Noodle Nirvana, you've got Happy Jack Sandwich, and you've got the Hole and Corner Donuts. So my first question is, are you absolutely crazy? Like it's crazy enough to own one restaurant and you have three. What's wrong with you, Mae?
I know, right? And all the carbs too, Dan.
All
we
the
take
carbs.
care of all the carb needs in Berea. It started with Noodle Nirvana, and I've lived in Berea on and off since I was a freshman in college. So it came in 1991. So I've lived in Kentucky for almost 30 years. I left for a little bit. But this is my community, this is my town, and the way that I have come to contribute to my community is through food, and to bringing people together through food. And it has been pretty amazing to watch. I mean, if I just sit and pause and think about it, and I walk into my noodle shop, I am in awe. It blows my mind. I walk into my noodle shop and there are a bunch of non-Asian people slurping noodles with chopsticks out of a bowl. And that's all that there is in this restaurant. That's all, just noodles on this little tiny main street. So it just caused me to pause and really reflect on how incredible that is, and how amazing that is for me to have this opportunity to share this part of my culture with this town in central Kentucky that's become my community.
Yeah, and we Asian Americans have been transforming American culture through our food since really probably the day we set foot in this country. The interesting one of the many interesting things about Mae's story is that, to some degree it's a little predictable that an Asian person opened an Asian or Asian-ish restaurant, but now you have a sandwich shop named after your son, and you've got a donut shop. What made you think about sort of diversifying and branching out into kind of different genres of food like that?
Well, a couple of things. These are all foods that I love and I can't really find in my hometown, so I had to feed myself. But also when you run restaurants, and Dan, you know this well, the profit margins in our industry are really, really tiny, minute. And when you run a restaurant with small profit margins that prioritizes your staff and the environment and the community, it's even harder. So honestly, I did want to serve these good foods to my community, but also I needed to find a way to generate revenue so that I could continue to do these things for my community. And I don't know, I talk about this all the time, but in the first 4 years of our operations, we raised almost $120,000 for 4 nonprofits in my hometown here. And to do that and pay our staff a living wage and make sure that we're using materials and products that don't harm our environment and cooking everything from scratch, there's a cost to that. So I had to figure out a way to basically expand the way that I created revenue so that I continue to be the type of employer I could wake up feeling good about.
Yeah, and the way you conduct your business too, it kind of helped me create one of my mantras in not just in business but in life, the idea of doing well by doing good. That it can go very much hand in hand. your ethical practices when it comes to your employees, paying them a living wage, treating them like human beings, ethical sourcing, thinking about the environment, thinking about how you do everything you do instead of just what you do. And then that deep, deep connection to the community, not just this idea of giving back, but just being fully connected with the community, I think is so vital. In a town as small as Berea is kind of a weird little place because
eccentric, we like to say.
Yeah, sure. There you go. It to me, it has very conservative strains. We saw there were some battles about Confederate products being sold at some of the street fairs in recent years. There were some battles regarding that. But then it's also, a very progressive town with Berea College there. How do you live in that sort of political intersection of, that push and pull?
Well, the magic, Dan, has really been the noodle bowl. It is amazing. If you were to walk in, we have these long family style tables. You've been to my shop. And if you were to walk in on a normal, non-COVID, pre-pandemic day, those tables, you would see literally, I'm not making this up because it sounds so cliche, but you will literally see the zucchini farmer sitting next to the college professor, sitting next to the Hitachi factory worker, all conversing and over bowls of mom's special house curry. So the way that I am able to do this is really by using food as a tool to bring different segments of my community together to have a starting point at least. I used to, and as you grow and evolve, and I'm sure I'll change again. I did run for city council in my town several years ago, and I did lose by 200 votes. And at that time, I thought that was the way that I was going to impact change in my community. And I found, that really you can impact change in whatever space you're in. And I found that currently it's easier for me to bring in people that walk on from these different parts of life, but, love these spring rolls that we hand make, and then start talking. Oh, did you grow the zucchini that made my zoodles in my bowl? And you teach at the college. I get it is so cool to have a starting point, because at the end of the day, I really do think that if we focus a little bit more intentionally on the things that we have in common, especially folks that live in the same tiny town of 15,000, that we could probably get a lot more done than fight like we do so often.
This is Where Y'all Really From, a podcast from LPM, Louisville Public Media. Welcome back to Where Y'all Really From. Nima, I wanted to ask you, so you were a lawyer turned House of Rep. Why make that jump?
Well, I'm still a lawyer, still having all of those issues, being an attorney, being a solo practitioner. And really, I think it's the area of law that I practice. I'm an immigration attorney, and immigration in this country is probably the most political area of law that you can get into. It depends on who's in charge, who's in the White House, who is representing you in Congress, and that's how your immigration policy is going to go. The laws haven't changed in decades, but you have these policy memos and executive orders that impact millions of people within a 24-hour period. So I've always been very acutely aware of who's doing what politically and on a policy level, because I have to in order to make sure my clients are going to be okay. And I think I really, like a lot of people, what prompted me to run for office was Trump. And that was his signature issue, immigration, and just really had to shut it down and in whatever way that he could. And they spent a lot of time and money and finding different angles, and a lot of them were unconstitutional, thankfully, but that was their goal. And so I saw some of that rhetoric kind of trickling down into our local and state politics. And I was looking around and seeing that there was no representation and nobody really standing up to all of that. And that's really why I took the leap. and ran against a 20-year incumbent because I thought, something needs to change, and this is the time. The time felt right. It was a lot of it was just sort of gut instinct. I think it's really interesting that everybody here is, so involved in policy and advocacy, in their own communities. So I'm really excited to be a part of this group. And I'm hopeful that many, many more AAPI folks will try to get into politics on whatever level, right? Campaigns, just advocating for policies, because it's really, really crucial that we've been here, like you've said, for so long, but not as engaged as we could be.
I mean, first of all, you are like a superhero, and I'm like absolutely fangirling just like interviewing you right now, because I mean, that is huge that you're the first Indian American elected into the state representative. You're the first Asian American. You're in there in a sea of non-diverse people. I mean, let's just call it as it is. You're in there with a bunch of white people, a bunch of white men. Isn't that scary? How did you feel when you took that leap?
Kentucky's a pretty white state, right? And so growing up, I grew up in Louisville, so it's not even like probably as white as some of the rural parts of the state. But even still, I've kind of had to deal with folks saying, hey, do you eat monkey brains? Because they watch Temple of Doom. Or, I mean, of course, we've got Apu to deal with, right? Generations of us have to deal with Apu. And so it's something that I've kind of had to grow up explaining. I don't take offense, not unless I know that the person is obviously being malicious. But a lot, what's really exhausting is that oftentimes, most times it's not. People actually think this. And so when a kid's asking you like, oh, you're eating a sandwich, like, do you all eat monkey brains at home? And they're like legitimately asking me that. I can't, get mad. Or, and it's just something that you kind of get used to being in that position and taking every moment to, teach people, explain to people where you come from, and, they can do with that what they want. But you're giving them that information.
No, yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because all four of us here are shaking our heads yes, like, because we've all been asked that question, right? Like, or, do you eat dog? Do you eat cat? Do you eat, and all these really unintentionally hurtful questions that we've been asked, right? And so it's really interesting that you bring that up, and that you've always been in that position. And I guess my question too is it even, you go in there into Frankfurt, you go and meet with a lot of white people who really sometimes discriminate you for your skin color. Can that be exhausting for you? Is that exhausting for you? I mean, in terms of, or does it empower you to do better and to move, to live another day, as you will?
Yeah, I mean, I think I occupy a very strange space in Frankfurt because I'm not Black and I'm not white. And in America, when you talk about race, that's all there is, or that's the first thing that anybody thinks of. And Asians, I mean, I was born in India. And when we first moved to Louisville, there weren't that many Indian families in Kentucky or in Louisville, really. And yet you had these pockets of Indians who were physicians who had come over sort of decades before as doctors. So you have pockets of Indian people in like rural Kentucky all over the place. And so people had this favorable impression of Indians. Like these are maybe the first interactions they had with a brown person that wasn't Mexican or Hispanic or, anything like that. And so it's this whole idea of a model minority, which is just so insidious. But I think that because of that, I've been able to have conversations and not immediately have been shut down by people that are just so overly dismissive of Black people and Black women. And that's a shame, but it's an opportunity as well. Or at least I've taken it that way to help support and champion certainly the Black women in the legislature, but to be able to discuss some of these issues and discuss some of the similarities, right, in terms of xenophobia versus bigotry versus racism and hatred and all of that for, multiple populations in Kentucky, LGBTQ, I mean, you name it. You've got people that don't understand who these people are unless you know somebody in your family or you're one of them yourself. you have to just constantly be explaining yourself and why you have a right to exist in the same space. So that's just sort of a fact of life, I think, for I see everybody nodding,
Mhm.
you know.
Yes, absolutely. Again, everyone's nodding, just living in that third space of yeah, being not white and not black, and you know, trying to be that the champion, as you say, in these spaces. I know and honestly, Nima, I had so many questions I wanted to ask you, but we're running out of time. And I feel like I might just call you and just ask you these questions personally. But I did want to ask really quickly, because I do think that this is, you know, the idea of this show, when we decided the name, Where Are Y'all From? That triggered me personally, because I'm still trying to figure out, you know, my emotions of what that means when people ask me that. Is that really, I know it's supposed to be unintentional, but at the same time, it's subconsciously making me as a quote unquote foreigner, right? So where it comes from. I just wanted to ask real quick, everyone, what that question, what kind of emotion and reaction does that elicit for you all? Where are y'all from?
Yeah, Nima, do you want to start?
Yeah. I think when somebody asks me that, even if it's in earnest, I get really tired really quickly. It's just a sense of, oh, okay. And I refuse to answer anything but Louisville or Kentucky or wherever I am in my district. And they really have to work to pry it out of me that I wasn't born here. And
Yeah.
I can't help myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Mae?
Well, you know, when I was younger, I would just in my teenage or even college years, I would just sigh and give them what they want. I'm from Thailand, although I was born in Chicago, raised in Chicago, lived most of my life here. I would just oh, it's just not worth it, you know, for a stranger. But in more recent years, when I'm asked that question, I will say, well, I was born in Chicago, but I have a feeling that that's not what you mean when you're asking me where I'm from. So I throw the responsibility back to them, and they are always then they start guessing. Are you Filipino? Are you Hawaiian? And then I was like, I think what you really want to know is where my family of origin is from. And then I say that we're Thai. The questions aren't usually where are you from anymore. And it might be because I live in a small community and we all know each other here. But I did have a neighbor that moved into the neighborhood not too long ago, husband and wife, a little bit older than us, walking. And I was walking with my husband, and she was like, oh, we just retired. My husband was in the military. And then looked at my husband, Adam, who's a white man, and said, are you all in the military too? and and I just thought that was so bizarre. That's never happened to me before. But why? It was just bizarre. And the ages were off. Everything was off with that question. It was a bizarre experience. But I do think people are more creative at trying to get to the answer of that question now than just simply asking where y'all from anymore.
But at the same time, still have those undertones, you know,
Absolutely.
it's the question might be different, but then
Yeah.
the sentiment is still very similar.
Yes.
Yeah. How do you answer it, Charlene?
It usually depends on my mood, quite honestly. Sometimes I just want to mess with people and just say, I'm from Northern Kentucky. I grew up in Northern Kentucky, you know, and they're like, well, where are you from? And I'm like, Hebron, you know. And other times, I'll just say, because I'm, you know, it's exhausting to try to explain yourself all the time. I was born in the Philippines, in Manila, and I grew up in Northern Kentucky since I was 7 years old, you know, so it's really exhausting sometimes. I think recently, in the past, especially now being a mom, you know, I'm trying to figure out how I want to explain myself in a very concise way, and trying to give my child some racial literacy to have him recognize, yes, there's going to be microaggressions, but here are some ways to deal with it, as opposed to how I dealt with it, which was very angry and probably unhealthy. Yeah. And so but I'm still working through that process, right? I don't want to stay mad. I want to make sure that I give a good example for my kids. But again, it's quite the process. So when I hear that question, it definitely triggers me. But working through it, which I think this podcast might be my own therapy,
There you go.
Dan, what do you think? What do you think about that question?
I've gone through all the different iterations of being straightforward, making them play the game, making them guess. And in recent years, I've gotten a little more aggressive about it. Sometimes I will literally, if it is a stranger completely out of context asking me where I'm from, I'll just kind of pause, wait a awkward few seconds, and then say, why do you ask? And that kind of stops a lot of people in their tracks and maybe makes them interrogate, and maybe makes them realize their innocent question doesn't come off so innocently. But I know Mae and I have this issue, and I know Nima, and honestly anybody who's remotely a public person does. If a customer asks me that, I'm not going to start calling them out and have a fight with them. I can't imagine Nima going aggro on one of her constituents, or one of her coworkers about it. So there's power dynamics at play. Like when we're in the service industry and these are customers who are paying the money that we make a living off of, we can't call them out and get into a whole conversation about why this is triggering for us. We may just have to give them the easy answer that they want and just kind of move on. And it's one of those sort of like, and that's yet another straw that we throw onto our back every single time we do that. And it gets very tiring, but it's,
I do think too, Dan, at least speaking for myself and a lot of other like AAPI, like you said, it depends on the space, right? And oftentimes we're not necessarily welcome in those spaces, or we seem as an other in those spaces, even if you are in a position of power, like a restaurant owner or like a state legislature. You're still getting asked these questions that check you being in that power, almost as if like you don't really belong in a power position. So I'm going to ask you this question that others you and kind of puts you in your place.
There you go.
We want to end each show with lightning round questions. So these are really quick questions and quick answers. So I'm going to start. Are you all ready? Nima and Mae?
Go.
Okay, Nima, I'm going to start with you. You ready?
Yes.
What's your superpower?
I've been told recently that it's arguing, and I was told this by my partner Reagan, so I'm going to assume it's true.
Perfect.
Favorite song to jam to?
Oh goodness, anything by Cake. Recently, anything by Wolfpack, and or some old 70s disco.
Amazing. Favorite comfort food?
Pasta of any kind, really.
And what's the most Kentucky thing you do?
So Reagan's family lives in central Kentucky, between Hodgenville and Campbellsville. So we go down there, they have land. We're like full Kentucky. There's like a target practice. I've shot bow and arrow. We've gone to Lincoln's like birthplace. So anytime I go down there, it is full on Kentucky.
Nice.
Amazing. That was a good lightning round. Okay, Mae, here we go.
All right, I'm ready.
What's your superpower?
I'm a Libra, and I've always been told that I'm painfully diplomatic. I'm working on that because I don't want to be diplomatic all the time. I want to be like certain in my position. But yeah.
Favorite song to jam to?
Currently, I am stuck in my early college years, and I'm deeply attracted to strong women that make me dance. So I've been listening to like En Vogue and TLC.
Yeah.
Before your time, but
that
early
is not
90s.
before my time. That's amazing. Favorite comfort food?
Well, noodles, of course.
Yeah, easy
And it
answer.
truly is.
And what's the most Kentucky thing you do?
Oh, I didn't even prepare for that. The most Kentucky thing I do. I live in a town that houses the first interracial college in the South. And I think that should be one of the most prominent, predominant Kentucky things that we tell the world about.
That's great.
Amazing. That's amazing. All right, Dan, you're up.
All right.
What's your superpower?
My superpower is that I just know a lot of people, and I know a lot of great people. And it honestly, getting through in the world in any field, knowing a lot of people is a huge leg up. So, yeah.
Favorite song to jam to?
I have a favorite album right now. I've always loved Tool, and they have a new album called Fear Inoculum. And I don't know why, like, even in the best of moods and the sunniest of days, like, I can put that dark, heavy music on, and it just puts me in such a good mood. I don't know why.
Favorite comfort food?
Oh, man. I love a bowl of rice and a bunch of banchan, which are these little pickle dishes that come at the beginning of every Korean meal. I could just absolutely live off of that.
What's the most Kentucky thing you do?
I don't pronounce my G's and my INGs, so I'm always walking, going, skipping, talking, listening, but never. I'm talking, but I'm never talking. You know what I mean? All right, back at you, Charlene. What is your superpower?
I can be friends with pretty much anybody. But people often tell me my superpower is that I could get secrets out of people. So future guests, watch out.
Yeah, that's precisely why we tapped Charlene to be a co-host of the show. How about your jam? What is your jam?
So also throwing it back to the early 90s and 2000s in my college years, I currently am loving old school Usher. As I like wash bottles in my sink, like baby bottles and like the dishes, I'm just jamming to like slow jams by Usher circa 1990s, early 2000s.
Nice. With the comfort food question, I know that your mom is coming into town soon. Yeah. So I don't know if she's going to be listening to this or not. So I don't want it to color your answer. But Charlene, what is your favorite comfort food?
I was actually going to say that anything my mom makes. And that is not trying to like... Although, I mean, she's like the best cook. But she makes a curry, which is absolutely amazing. And then her chicken adobo is like my favorite comfort food. It just brings back lots of memories from home.
Yeah.
Do we need a meetup at Charlene's house to talk about future programs?
Yes, I think so. She also has a 3-month-old baby that we can pass around. So.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
So they're fully vaccinated.
Right? Next episode's at my house, I guess.
Nice. And lastly, Charlene, what is the most Kentucky thing that you do?
What's funny about this question is that I think I picked out this question. I still don't know how to answer it. So I'm going to say we love going to the Kentucky Horse Park. My son's like obsessed with horses. And so he loves going and like petting horses and seeing them and all of that. So the Kentucky Horse, shout out to the Kentucky Horse Park because we just love visiting there and like seeing all the different attractions around the state.
Awesome.
Whew, what a lightning round. Okay. Thank you all so much. I wanted to thank Mae and Nima for coming on as our first guest, our initial show, which is super exciting. I also want to thank Dan for tapping me into this amazing project and bringing me along for this ride. Thank you all so much.
Where Y'all Really From is created by Dan Wu, Charlene Buckles, Nima Kulkarni, and Mae Suramek, and hosted by Dan and Charlene. Our show is edited by Alex Cooper, and our music is by Kojin Toshiro. Graphic design by Leanne Gann. Where Y'all Really From is part of the Louisville Public Media Podcast Incubator with support from the Community Foundation of Louisville, Podchaser, Rankings.io, and the Eye Care Institute's Butchertown Clinical Trials. Our executive producer is Laura Ellis. For more information and to keep in touch, visit whereyallreallyfrom.org.
Support for the Louisville Public Media Podcast Incubator comes from the Community Foundation of Louisville, helping donors in our community establish charitable funds to meet philanthropic goals. creating opportunities to give more through scholarship, charitable checking, and donor-advised funds, and helping donors create a charitable legacy through their estate plan. More at cflouisville.org.